and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors episode 489. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by Viable Human, Chris Saturn.
Hi, Justin.
Hi, Saturn.
Yeah, whenever we have that slight pause before the show, I always want to immediately mute and make all of my dad noises.
Your dad noises, yeah. All your throat clears
and then I realize like muting defeats the purpose of that pause.
of getting room noise. Yeah, Saturn's room noise was just great this episode. I don't know why he sounds all blown out. I don't fucking get it. It's the weirdest thing. For housekeeping, I've had an exorbitant amount of caffeine, and Guy is going to be here for the after party at the end of after the music. There's the music you just heard. And then at the end, there will be another music, and then he's after that music.
It's also after the Patreon name, so make sure that you don't just immediately tune out because we're thanking very nice people.
I know you do. I read the metrics. Don't. They're going to do it anyway. Or they're going to hit that skip button and they're going to skip ahead. I know them. I know when people tune out. Google tells me on their podcast platform that they're shutting down because they can't even run a platform where everyone else is making the content, apparently.
They already shut that down, didn't they?
I don't know. I didn't log into it because it sucks so much.
It forced me to funnel any of that into YouTube Music.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah.
I don't want to end up on one of those big gross platforms.
Yeah.
Patreon was like, sync your show with Spotify, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do that.
So I had subscribed to us on the old Google Podcasts app, and so now it shows me as subscribed in YouTube Music. So now sometimes when I'm watching YouTube on my TV, it'll just randomly recommend our most recent episode to me.
Well, we also post the show on YouTube.
True. But it will show me both feeds of it. And what's funny is like I'll be browsing through YouTube and see like just the picture of something and be like, hey, that's a thing we talked about on the show just a couple. Oh wait, that's us. That's that is our show.
I don't read our YouTube comments because I don't log into our YouTube account. The show just posts there so that, but every now and then
I'll comments ever at any.
I read a lot of YouTube
why
comments.
Would you do that?
It's like, because like Jerry Springer's not on the air anymore, and so like I need to watch like the
dumpster fire.
Yeah, dumpster fires occur of just like people screaming at each other about ridiculous shit.
Well,
it's a
the
cesspool.
difference is Jerry Springer would always end his show by telling you to be nice to each other, and YouTube comments ends the comment section by telling you to go fuck yourself.
It is brutal in the YouTube. It's full on Thunderdome in the YouTube comments. You'll be watching the nicest video. Just a fucking video of like a cat eating some tuna, a cute kitten or something. People in the comments are like, this fucking cat's dead now. And then someone else is yelling at him. And you're like, what is... Anyway, my point is, like once every 6 months, I'll need to log into the YouTube for something. And it'll give me a bunch of comments. And I'll have to go through and like approve or whatever.
Yeah.
And we got one the other day.
Oh, no.
It said, this is just a still image because the show posts, but it's audio.
Yeah.
And so someone was sitting there watching it, waiting for us to appear.
Nice.
Oh, man. That got me real good.
My issue with YouTube comments is not only are they all hateful, but they're all written as if it is a 12-year-old, which it might be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's all just one 12-year-old with a lot of free time. Anyway, we're still in the intro to this. We're never going to get through this.
Right. This episode. Justin, what did you do this week?
My week, I went to BGG Con. For people that aren't into board games.
Graphics Con.
Background Graphics Con, where we all just look at gradient images for 4 days.
Just a picture of a cityscape.
It's a convention run by Board Game Geek, which is kind of the like de facto review and news website of the board game hobby.
Also aficionados of background graphics.
Right. They show up there very confused. It's BGG is to board games as like IGN is to video games. Right. It's kind of the like premier media and review outlet. Right. I guess, I mean, really, it's all kind of user driven, so it's more like an open critic type situation, but just as far as prominence in the space, right?
But it's where you go to get all your information about the variants of Monopoly, is what you're saying.
Right. It's all the different, I don't recommend it, but you can find that information there. It's unfortunately very well documented.
Yeah.
And so I went to that with everyone from my weekly D&D group, except one person. She couldn't make it. And we all stayed in a big Airbnb, and we hung out at this convention and played RPGs and just had a good old time.
Nice.
And it was a lot of fun. I had not been to this convention. I likely will never return because it's at a very bad time of year for me. Next year, it's on my daughter's birthday, so I don't know if she'll like me spending her 10th birthday pretending to be an elf in Dallas. But yeah, it was a good time.
What you should do is go spend the rest of that week being an elf in Dallas.
Right.
And then just make up for it.
RPGs I played Tales from the Loop, which is like hard
Monopoly.
To explain. It's like Monopoly. It's an RPG where you play like teenagers in like a fictionalized version of the 90s where like sci-fi tech went crazy in the 80s. So it's like alternate universe, 90s, which is pretty cool. I played Transformers, which is like GoBots, but not as shitty.
Cool. All right.
We played The Fantasy Trip, which is an old Steve Jackson game, and then I played a game. The only way I know to pronounce it is Cyberpunk, but it's spelled. It's CBR_PNK. And it is a cyberpunk role-playing game using the Blades in the Dark rule set.
That is intentionally unpronounceable.
Yeah, I was like, this is a terrible product. The only way to pronounce it is Cyberpunk. And just so you know, the premier Cyberpunk RPG is called Cyberpunk. Yeah. Yes. So bad idea, guys. Right? Just stupid. In fact, it was extra confusing because the game was supposed to be regular Cyberpunk, but the GM got sick and someone else stood in and they were like, I don't know that system, but I know this one. So people were showing up to play Cyberpunk and we were going, no, we're not playing that. We're playing Cyberpunk. And they were like, did you just have a stroke? It was very confusing for like a whole minute there where you're like, no, we're not playing Cyberpunk. We're playing Cyberpunk, spelled bad. But for anyone that knows RPGs, those are the RPGs that I played. We also played a whole bunch of games of Root, the board game Root, which is a game about cute woodland animals in bright colors murdering each other in the woods.
Oh, just like real life.
Just like real life. It's Happy Tree Friends, the board game.
Nice.
So there you go. That was. We were there for. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's 3 days. So we missed the first 2 days. The conventions always start on like Wednesday. And I'm like, who's taking half a week off for this shit?
A surprising number of people.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But it was the biggest convention I've been to yet. Attendance was capped at 2,600 people. The biggest one outside of that I'd been to was like 500 people. So this was quite a bit larger.
Bit of a jump there.
It was in Dallas in Reunion Tower, the building, the little hotel connected to it. And it was all very nice, very cool. Yeah. Something was wrong with their sewer because it smelled like a sewer for a lot of the time.
No, that's normal.
No. It was.
I've lived in and around Dallas most of my life. That's normal.
It was not normal con funk. It was like, it was bad. It was very bad.
No. I'm saying it's normal for Reunion Tower.
Oh, just in general for Dallas. Yes. Okay, well, that sucks for them. But yeah, I was there for several days and just played a whole mess of their tabletop games. And it was
whole mess of them.
Whole mess of them out in Dallas.
Out in Big D-Town.
I'm trying to figure out how to plan my conventions next year. I go to 3 a year, and the 3 that I like going to, I can't go to next year. So I got to figure out what the fuck I'm going to do.
But we'll call them and ask them to please reschedule.
Right, please reschedule, or it's a whole ordeal. There's what's interesting is, I usually play with the same group that goes to these conventions, or generally the same people.
Yeah.
And so because they hit all these conventions as a group and like run a lot of the stuff there, you hear all the convention drama. And let me tell you, if you have never been in or around conventions, they are fucking chock full of drama.
Oh yeah.
Non-stop drama, top to bottom. So I do like getting to go, and then I'll always be like, hey, what happened with such and such? And the answer is always like, man, there's a whole bunch of drama. And I'm like, oh, do tell.
I have some good friends that worked security at Acon and Allcon several years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So they always knew exactly what was going on. And anytime you would ask them about it, they would always have that same exasperated expression.
Yep. It's crazy. I never knew that. I never knew that. Also, so much drama around conventions.
Also, there is so much. I don't know if it's as true at tabletop and board game conventions as it is at anime and pop culture conventions, but there is just so much sleeping around there. There is
yeah, not a lot of tabletop role-playing game aficionados are, like having group sex events in hotels. They're usually just there to pretend to be elves for a couple hours.
That is,
or at least I'm not invited to it if it is. I don't know. I don't see it. So
I'm just imagining a guy getting on his segment later. He's like, yeah, Justin missed all the group sex events.
All the group sex that occurred. It was ridiculous. There's so much group sex. You just opened the hotel door and it was just flesh all the way through. Saturn, what have you been doing with your week?
Speaking of flesh all the way through, I was playing the Silent Hill 2 to get through the last few endings.
Yeah.
And I just finished the moments before we started recording. I finished the boss fight that is just rooms made of flesh.
Ew.
So, yeah, that's the most unfortunate boss.
Yeah.
I am trying my best to not spoil it at all, but it is traumatic, I guess.
Yeah. Is there any horror left in the game for you? You've played through it like 50 times now to get all the endings.
I'm at the point where I'm mostly desensitized to a lot of the horror.
Rooms made of flesh.
Yeah, that's fine. That one scene still gets to me every time though, not because of the horror of it, but because of just the tone and the background of it, because it's
it's just dark.
It's not in your main character's perspective. You're seeing it from the perspective of another character who is a victim of sexual abuse.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it's just really...
That's rough.
Yeah, it's gross and unfortunate. But I am wrapping up the game. I am very close to the end of what should be my last playthrough to get all the achievements and all the different endings. I am appreciating this playthrough because this is the first time I decided to go ahead and grab the chainsaw, which makes horror games better.
You don't say.
Yeah, so anytime you do New Game Plus in Silent Hill 2, there's a chainsaw just sitting right at the intro, like next to where you start. And it has unlimited fuel. It one-hit kills most enemies, including several bosses. And also, anytime you have it equipped, sometimes he will just randomly raise it over his head like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But you can't move while he's doing it, so you gotta hope that there's not an enemy nearby. Also, I'm going for the achievement where you don't turn on your radio at all, and the radio is what gives you indication that there are enemies nearby.
Oh no! All right.
And so I thought when I read this achievement that no radio, I'd be like, oh shit, that's going to make the game much harder, and I'm going to be taken off guard. No, it makes the game way easier. So. Without the radio static, you don't necessarily know an enemy is around, except for they all make noises. All of them make noises. And without the radio static just being from right on top of you at all times, my surround system can help me pinpoint exactly where that enemy is. It's like, oh, I heard that grunt over there. That's where the enemy is. And it's made the game so much easier and less stressful. And so anytime I replay this, I'm only going to do no radio going forward. I have had to constantly remind myself, despite being on my third playthrough now, that it is not Resident Evil, because there are several segments where you'll walk into a room and there's just a bunch of dead enemies laying around.
Yeah,
and they're gonna get up, like
right. Obviously,
they're gonna.
Yeah.
And in a Resident Evil game, if you walk into a room for the first time and there's a zombie dead on the ground, I'll just shoot it a couple times and it'll start to get up, and then I can keep shooting it until it falls down, and then it's dead for good. And in Silent Hill, you can shoot them as much as you want on the ground and nothing's going to happen. So that's a corpse. They're
committed.
That's a dead thing. And then as soon as you grab the item in the room, they all get up at once. Like, motherfucker, I wasted so much ammo on you already. But no, it's still good. It's probably my game of the year so far.
Oh, all right.
It is very, very good.
Also, sure your game of the year isn't the newest Call of Duty or whatever.
Well, it's a toss-up. It's that or Honkai Star Rail.
Oh man, Honkai! Yeah, I can't forget about that.
There's a guy at work who will not shut up about Honkai Star Rail right now.
I love the name of that game.
Yeah.
Honkai. Anyway,
also been playing Monster Train.
Yes, I booted that up one time, tried to learn it, went, I hate trains, and turned it off. And so I've not returned to it, but how is it?
It's just Slay the Spire, but in a train.
in a train. Yeah. I saw that it was called Monster Train. I didn't know trains were going to be featured so prominently in it. Maybe that's my mistake. In my head, I'm just like a train, like a bunch of monsters in a row. And it's like, no. It's very train focused. Yeah, it's very much about the train.
Like, I like the theme is very much like demons versus angels, protect hell from the invasion, all that. That's cute.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that it's not all try hard. I was a little worried it was going to be that.
It seems goofy.
Yeah, it feels like it's being just goofy enough that I'm willing to appreciate it. But it's very much just slay the spire, but you're on a train. And that's fine. The I haven't gotten deep enough in to unlock all the different
trains,
classes or factions or whatever it is that you get.
Yeah,
so I'll see how it goes, but I'm enjoying it enough so far. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything exciting or new to me yet, so maybe I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah. Well, let's do some of this here news.
Oh.
First up, 8BitDo has announced a new mechanical keyboard with a full number pad, which is exciting for you number pad freaks out there.
This is making me slightly more interested in getting one.
And so it's currently available for pre-order in NES and Famicom colors. They've released their previous mechanical keyboard in like C64 colors and some other in air quotes DOS color, just old.
I thought
beige
I saw
PC
this one
colors.
in the IBM style.
I didn't, but I might have just not found the listing, so they might have separate listings for it. But that's exciting. I have the first version of this keyboard, and I love it. For the money, the best mechanical keyboard, most feature-rich mechanical keyboard I own. Hands down, and I've got some expensive ones.
Oh no, it wasn't an actual IBM layout for it yet. They just have it sitting in front of an IBM in their promo art.
Of course.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's cool. I really, really like their previous keyboard. Andrew has the NES version of it. He loves it. They're really good keyboards for a really good price.
Yeah,
for people that don't know anything about mechanical keyboards, this is just a really good one all around.
If they do a C64 one again, I'll probably end up caving in and getting it.
Yeah. Amplitude Studios, the people behind Endless Space, Endless Dungeon, are splitting off from Sega Sammy and going independent again. Independent. They were independent before. And then they got scooped up, and now they're breaking off to go independent again. I think this is the second studio recently announced going independent from Sega, which I like to see that. I don't know business-wise how or why these things happen on the back end.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see companies regaining independence.
I have seen, it feels like a few different European companies that had previously been bought by Japanese studios have been arbitrarily splitting back off again.
Yeah.
We saw this with most of Square Enix's European branch. Now we're seeing it with several parts of Sega's European branch.
Yeah, which I didn't know was really possible. Like I don't know anything about corporations or how this shit works. I mean, like theoretically I know that it's possible, but in my head I'm like, why would they let them? Like presumably the parent company has to go, okay, yeah, you can just exit.
Well, often what happens is they were already considering shutting it down anyway, and the employees just buy out their stake in themselves. So.
Yeah, I guess that's a little these stories are often sold as like, oh, they decided to go independent, rather than, oh, they were in the shitter and the employees spent their last ditch amount of money to hopefully not, nosedive into financial ruin. Is a slightly less uplifting story.
That's basically what happened with IO Interactive as well, as they had that Hitman reboot. And it did pretty well. And Square Enix was going to shut them down anyway because it wasn't selling well enough. And so they bought out themselves and the rights to the Hitman license, and it continued to do even better.
Yeah. Nintendo has filed a lawsuit against streamer Jesse Keighan, K-E-I-G-H-I, Keighan?
I don't know.
I'm going to say Keighan.
Sure.
That's how I'm going to say it. For streaming unreleased games. In response, Keighan threatened Nintendo, said they had plenty of burner accounts and they could, quote, do this all day.
Yeah, I appreciate that Nintendo actually commented that in the lawsuit against him.
Yeah,
that's not the correct response, by the way.
First of all, don't do that.
Yeah,
Nintendo is a big company. You are setting yourself up for financial ruin.
Correct. Yeah.
But also, it's really great to see someone fighting the good fight.
Right.
Like it's
funny as hell. They're going to lose. They're going to lose hard.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely.
But
when your response is, not only can I do this illegal thing, I can do it all day long.
Yeah,
yeah.
It turns out that's not going to buy you any favor in court.
But I'll say this: if we all did it, then
we would have to literally all do it. It would have to be all 7 billion of us.
But
including the employees at Nintendo.
True. They can't sue us all, you guys.
Turns out they can't.
I'm sorry, their lawsuit is how big? Valve has announced a new white version of the Steam Deck available for sale on November 18th, which is a few days ago. At the time of writing, it's still available. Today's the 21st, I think. And so it is still currently out there to be purchased, so it's not that limited, I guess. But I like it. It looks cool.
One of my coworkers was looking into a Steam Deck recently. He'd finally decided he wanted to get one, so I brought mine up to the office, the one that you gave me, so that he could play around with it. And so he is now wanting to buy it, and that's when he learned that you can't buy it in stores anymore. Neither Best Buy nor GameStop sell it. And also if you buy it on Amazon, there's a pretty sizable markup. Because
I was saying just buy it on Steam.
That's what I said. I was like, well, why
in the U.S. You gotta get on Steam anyway to use the fucking thing.
That was my thing. I was like, you have a Steam account if you are using it, so why don't you just buy it on Steam? And he was like, well, I have all these Amazon gift cards, and so I wanted to use that.
Do what I do and sell them to your mom, and not your mom, my mom. You know what I mean? Sell them to your mom's. And then you know.
Yeah, he was whining about that. He's like, oh, why can't I buy it from Amazon? I was like, just buy it from Valve. Buy some Steam gift cards on Amazon. Can you do that? I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know.
Right.
Amazon Prime Video released a trailer for their upcoming Madden documentary that everyone was excited about for a minute. It features football men and football stuff. Yeah. And people for like that day, that afternoon, people were like, "Yeah, Madden documentary." And so,
who was that guy on Mad TV that used to play John Madden?
Oh, Frank Caliendo.
Yeah, they should get him to play it in the documentary. He's really good at it.
He also did a good George W. Bush.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and he could also play that in the documentary.
Yeah, he did a few. He did a few good ones. A few good. I'll also do that. Just Frank Caliendo is just gonna fucking Bugs Bunny this Madden documentary. You know what? I would watch that. I'd watch the shit out of that.
Yeah.
Ferrante Crafts, Ferrante. Ferrante Crafts, a retro game publisher on Etsy, had their games removed from their Etsy store by Etsy after being flagged for promoting piracy. These are all homebrew games on aftermarket cartridges.
Meanwhile, you can go on Etsy right now and get reproductions of fucking anything.
To be clear, the games are still available on Ferrante Crafts' regular website.
Yeah.
So for anyone that heard this news story and was like, "Oh, I want to get some of those games," you can still buy them. I went and checked, and you can still purchase them. But it's frustrating to see these corporations automating these types of processes, especially a corporation like Etsy that allows just so much stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's just AliExpress air shipped, junk that people are just reselling on Etsy. Like, why don't you fix your store before you go after people actually making stuff?
Right.
I don't know, just a fucking thought.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
GOG launched their Good Old Game label, promising that any game with the label will properly work on current systems and has been updated to work on the most recent version of Windows.
That sounds familiar.
Which is kind of the point of GOG to begin with.
Oh.
And we had a long discussion in the news channel about this. Basically, what has happened is GOG, when it originally launched, for people that don't know, was called Good Old Games.
Right.
And
I still call it
that. Their whole bit was that they had old games that worked on modern Windows. And as time has gone on, they've turned into more of a general marketplace.
Right.
And in more recent times, a hentai games marketplace.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They have a whole section. For a while, their whole front page was just hentai games. And they finally got it to where it's kind of sectioned off in its own little zone. But they have they started allowing them, and they got a deluge of them.
I never see any of the porn on GOG or Steam anytime I go there.
So GOG, it really was like all over their front page for the first little bit that like they seem to not know how to properly section it. Now they have. You kind of have to look for it, but
must have just not gone there during that era.
Yeah. And in that time of them just becoming a general marketplace, a lot of the titles on the GOG marketplace just didn't function. I've had to refund a few games in the course of the show that I bought on GOG that just didn't work on modern Windows. The installers aren't kept up to date. They've just had a little bit of issues. They've kind of slid back from their original promise of good old games.
Like Soul Reaver?
Soul Reaver was one of them. I did have to refund that one because it just didn't work. And so this label, the way I view it, is kind of a recommitment to those values without having to admit that they slid away from them a little bit. I'm not upset to see it. It's something they should have been doing the whole time, but also, I don't know.
If you're going to be selling a thing, you should make sure it works.
That it works, yeah. But granted, I mean, they launched in 2008. A lot of stuff that worked in Windows in 2008 doesn't work on Windows 11. So, like, I don't know. I kind of get it a little bit. But it's nice to see them recommitting to being the good old games place rather than just a general marketplace.
In fairness, there are things that launched in 2024 on Windows 11 that don't work on Windows 11.
Yeah. So. Old Unreal Project, which is a fan project, has been given permission by Epic to host an installer that downloads and installs the original Unreal Gold from a disk version of it on archive.org.
That's nice.
Which is pretty close to allowing them to host the official game. Yeah. Which is cool. That's cool to see, fan projects kind of, getting a little nod of like, hey, you're allowed to kind of keep our thing alive because we don't fucking care about it anymore, obviously. So that's nice to see.
I think the Suffering is still on archive.org because the U.S. Army allowed it to be put there.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
So fucking weird.
The Air Force or whoever it was that bought the distribution rights for that game.
To the Suffering. Associate Manager of Lore at Sega, Chris Hernandez, has confirmed on social media that Sonic is officially in the lore unhoused. So anyone who is wondering, yes, Sonic is homeless, according to Sega's official lore master.
Huh. That only begs the question, do the rest of them have houses?
I don't know. It's a great question.
Is like Big the Cat in a palatial Hollywood estate just laughing at Sonic?
I've no fucking idea. I mean, Robotnik has a house, obviously. He lives in these big, like, robot mansion things. But other than that, just kind of whatever.
Isn't he Eggman now?
Shut up, Saturn. His name is Dr. Robotnik. It's going to always be his name.
Right.
Striking union workers at ZeniMax are threatening a walkout if Microsoft is not more proactive about meeting with them to come to a compromise about their demands.
Good.
The strike is largely in response to Microsoft committing to outsourcing quality assurance jobs and enforcing return-to-work mandates for remote workers.
Yeah, that's only going to become more and more of a thing. I'm already sick of return to work, but it seems
Microsoft's also dealing with the Activision Blizzard union.
Good.
Who are also fighting for their rights. So it's good to see workers standing up for themselves,
right?
Which is nice. Final Fantasy 16 has only sold 289,000 units on PC since launch. Turns out when you wait like a year, people are less excited about your game, I guess.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't even buy it on Steam, and I'll buy fucking everything. Yeah,
even Saturn didn't buy it.
Right?
He'll buy anything.
When a game is already a year old and there's already been reviews for a year, it feels like PC gamers are just going to be like, I'll wait for a sale.
Yeah. I mean, I already got to wait a year. Why not wait till the winter sale and get $20 off or whatever?
Especially when the game is $70 fucking.
Yeah. Yeah. And finally, a game preservation group. I believe the preservation group was named Hard 4 Games.
Yeah. They've got a YouTube channel.
Has acquired a full copy of Nintendo's 2001 E3 trailer reel in a higher quality than it has ever been previously available. For people that don't know, a lot of these old E3 trailer reels and sizzle reels and stuff are very poorly preserved.
Oh, yeah. Often so it's really cool. You can see them at all as somebody's shaky cam recording of it from a convention center.
And so it's really nice to get these in higher quality because there's a lot of games that are shown in certain states, and a lot of preservationists can use this to be like, hey, that is a different version of the game than we got. Where is that version? Right. Have we found that version? Also, it's just cool to see like gaming culture at the time and how weirdly thirsty it was in the early aughts.
That was when the
very strange era
Smash Melee trailer debuted, I believe.
Oh yeah, I guess it would have been around that time.
Yeah,
interesting. Which brings us to our topic at hand.
Oh.
which is, of course, Final Fantasy II.
Oh, they made a sequel. It's not very final, is it?
Nah, it turns out they made another one. Did you guys know they made a sequel to that Nintendo game? It was supposed to be their last one, but for synopsis, Saturn wrote, no, not that Final Fantasy II, the other one. I was going to write one that was Empty Rooms the game. That's the one I was going to write.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Fucking feels like that. Release info is long and storied. I'm going to fire through it real quick. Developed and published by Square. Post WonderSwan versions published by Square Enix. Came out on the Famicom in 1988. Never hit North American shores on the Nintendo. WonderSwan Color version came out in 2001. PlayStation came out in 2002 to 2003, depending on region. The GBA version, of course, came as part of the Dawn of Souls compilation. It came out in 2004 in different regions. PSP version was in 2007 and 2008. And there are other versions. There's the feature phone version in Japan. BlackBerry version came out internationally in 2005. It was on iOS in 2010. Android in Japan 2012 and December 2012 international. And Pixel Remasters came out kind of in the 2021 to 2024 region. It still feels like they're slowly getting released, as we covered in our previous
I think they've hit everything now, unless
I don't know.
Stadia.
I don't know. At any moment, I'm waiting for them to announce some weird shit. The games they seem to never stop working on.
Yeah, like, hey, we just released the Pixel Remasters on Oculus Quest.
Like, I would not be shocked if tomorrow they're like, oh, we're adding the After Years to Final Fantasy IV. Like, they just seem to randomly be like, we're going to do this now. Yeah. It's the weirdest thing. As far as first encounters, my first encounter with the first Final Fantasy, so my first Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII because I was 9 when it came out. I was right at that age. That's the Final Fantasy age, is like 9, 10, you know. And I had seen it. I got it for PC, and I couldn't get past the first disc because of how bad that PC port was, and it was on my eMachine T1000, and it ran like dog shit.
Yeah. I played through it twice.
And you had to use the number pad and everything. And so then I was like, hey, they're releasing Final Fantasy on GBA because I had a GameCube at the time.
You didn't want to play Crystal Chronicles.
I did. I think I played it once and I was like, this game blows.
Well, did you play it with 4 GBAs?
No. What's that one Penny Arcade where he's like, oh, so now I gotta go out and buy 4 GameCubes and 4 GBAs and pay 4 prostitutes to come play it with me, and then I guess I gotta feed them and I gotta buy a house to play it all in. No, I did not do all that. And so Dawn of Souls was kind of my first real like Final Fantasy. It's the first time I really got to play through, and I played through Final Fantasy 1 and I loved it. And then I immediately, upon finishing it, booted up Final Fantasy 2. Played like literally 2 battles and then was like, what the fuck is this? And turned it off and never returned to it until this show, all these 20 years later, to see how it is. So that was my trajectory with it. And then, I mean, really, in the Final Fantasy circles, it's kind of referred to the same way that like Zelda 2 and Mario 2 is. They're like, oh, the one shitty weird one.
It's the black sheep.
And so, yeah, I just never returned to it until this show.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What about you?
I had played through the fan translation when Demi-Force put it out back in '98, and this was probably in Nesticle because that was the emulator of choice at the time.
Right.
And I remember just being really off-put by the mechanics, and the game was already, it felt old as shit in '98. That was the same year, like I had just finished playing Final Fantasy VIII when the translation of Final Fantasy II came out. And and it was the Famicom version, which is rough. You don't know how good you have it in the Pixel Remaster until you play the Famicom version. And I managed to get through it. I probably cheated a bit because that game is rough. And then I played a bit of the PS1 version when it came out, and that made me realize how bad the fan translation was. Like, that's not a good translation looking back at it. But I didn't really gain any appreciation for the game. I don't even think I finished it until the GBA port, and then I kind of pushed myself through the post game and everything, and gained a little more of an appreciation for it at that point.
So, for people not wanting spoilers, we do have the story sectioned off into the second episode of this because it's going to be a two-parter. So if you don't want any spoilers, you can safely listen to this episode. There might be minor stuff here and there because we are going to talk about development and mechanics and stuff, but we're going to go end to end on the story next episode. Yep. So if you're super spoiler averse, you probably didn't even start this episode. But if you're just like, hey, just don't tell me the story verbatim, then you're good for this episode. Right. And we'll put up a spoiler warning on that one. So let's start. Walk me through the development for Final Fantasy II. They've had Final Fantasy come out. It was a decent success.
Yep.
According to the thing that is completely unsubstantiated, it was supposed to be their last game and it saved the company, which I think we've all kind of decided is a little hyperbolic.
Oh no, they've come out and said that was not true. That they don't know.
Oh, not true at all now. Okay, all right. Well, now that we know, it's just completely false.
I think we discussed that on our Final Fantasy 1 episode. That Sakaguchi has since stated that was never the case. They were never like they were not in great shape financially, but it was never the make or break project.
Well, next you're going to tell me that Sonic's shoes aren't really red because of the love he has for all his fans.
No, it's because of his love for Michael Jackson, actually.
Is that what it is? So step me through the development of Final Fantasy II.
So Hironobu Sakaguchi, he was the director of the original game. He had been
the guy.
He had been the planner of the original game, and he was promoted to director. He was also given a bigger staff and basically immediately instructed, do it again because they want the monies. So the game's lead designers were Hiromichi Tanaka and Akitosha Kawatsu and Koichi Ishii, who would mostly go on to work on games in the Saga and Mana series following the release of Final Fantasy II. They did a little help here and there on the Final Fantasy series, but this was the only one that they designed, and that becomes obvious.
Yeah, it shows.
Kawatsu specifically was the creator and lead developer for most of the games in the Saga series, and that also shows after having played any of the Saga games, you'll definitely see the DNA of Final Fantasy II in them, except for Saga 3. That's the weird one.
Yeah.
And while Sakaguchi did make the plot outlines, the scenario and the script were handled by Kenji Tarada, who would leave Square following the release of Final Fantasy III. There was also a novelization of the game made by Tarada. It was released in Japan as Final Fantasy II Muma no Mekyu, which is apparently the Labyrinth of Nightmares, which I don't remember there being a Labyrinth of Nightmares in the game.
That does not sound familiar, and I played the whole game.
Yeah, so I don't know what the novelization had to do with.
I think the Labyrinth of Nightmares is trying to make a book-length story out of the story of Final Fantasy II.
Yeah, because I assume that the novelization was 7 pages long.
Right, yeah. That would be pushing it.
Yeah. I struggled to get 7 pages out of my Cliff's Notes. There were multiple scripts that were considered during development, and also it should be noted, this much story in an NES game was relatively uncommon at this time. We're joking around about how light the story is, but for a Famicom game, this was pretty in depth as far as the story goes.
Absolutely. I mean, just it was, especially compared to the first game, which had a little bit, had kind of the bones of a story, but
even compared to the third game, which was pretty story-light comparatively.
True. I mean, the third game had a lot of people talking to each other, but a lot of it was kind of vestigial. It was just there so people said words. There was no actual story, so yeah.
So yeah, they did have multiple scripts that they considered. One of the earliest known scripts revolved around a war of succession over Altair's king and his 3 sons, and the script featured some time skips, and you have to jump to the next
very
time period.
Saga-y.
Most of those things just ended up being used in the Romancing Saga games instead.
Yeah.
Because none of that is in the actual game. The stat system, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get to the gameplay, was developed as an internal shift away from the job system of the previous game. Basically, they didn't want to do the same thing they'd done before. They didn't want to do just the clone of D&D, essentially. And they wanted the players to be able to mold their characters into whatever job archetype they wanted without having any strict rules of what job can do what. Instead, they just kind of made everybody the same.
And we'd been talking about this in a little bit last episode, and a little bit in private discussion leading up to this episode of the first one. The first game feels very like D&D, but scaled down to what an what a Famicom can handle.
Yeah, what if D&D was wizardry?
Yeah, and so when they get to this one, like it feels like they wanted to break away from all of that so badly and do everything themselves.
Yeah.
And I think
what they learned is they don't have the talent to do that.
Well, I think what happened was they accidentally brought in a lot of kind of ideas ingrained in like fantasy role playing at the time. And then when they ejected all of them, they lost all of that language and all of that just sort of came along with it and naturally made things make sense, like characters automatically fitting certain archetypes and the way the magic system worked.
Yeah.
And I think breaking away from that entirely really opens the game up in a way that's really interesting for an NES game.
Yeah.
But also at the same time kind of waters the whole experience down.
Right.
Where, like you're saying, everyone is everything.
Yeah.
And when everyone is everything, no one feels like anything.
Yeah, and also the world map is basically completely open from the beginning, which makes it feel like you have all these places to go, but
yes,
but also you have no real direction.
It feels so much more linear compared to the first game.
Yeah.
I don't know that it is like on paper.
It kind of is, because a lot of things have to be done in the story order. So even though you can go to other areas, like you can go to Mysidia at the very beginning of the game, but you get there and they'll just be like, I don't know what to say.
Which makes it feel. I did that and I was like, that's weird. And then later on in the game, they're like, oh, this secret magic village. And I'm like, that place I fucking walked to earlier?
Yeah.
It's just right there.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know. So I appreciate that they wanted to break away and be like, hey, let's reinvent this. What does fantasy role playing mean to us? What is our version of it? And this is something I see in a lot of like tabletop gaming too, of people being like, I want to break away from the archetypes that like Dungeons and Dragons established.
Right.
But you're having to replace a lot of years of
development,
reinforcing the good bits and dropping the bad bits of that archetype.
Right.
And starting from zero is a big task, you know. So I think they I don't want to say they set themselves up for failure, because spoiler alert, I enjoyed my time with the game. I know you enjoyed your time with the game, and you know, it doesn't mean we don't have some issues with it.
Right.
But I think it set them up to have some struggles.
Oh yeah,
for sure, that you can kind of feel in the design with how
and some
open
of the
everything is.
Some of the struggles they have, I feel like they ironed out by the time they got further into the Saga series.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have taken that idea and ran with it, because I don't think it was a bad idea.
No.
I think it just felt less fully formed than Final Fantasy 1 did, because it brought in all that language of fantasy role playing. It could borrow all of that.
Also, there was a lot of bugs and glitches, especially in the first one.
Oh, for sure.
That made the system kind of broken.
Yeah, it was broken in its own special and different way. Where were we in the thing?
So, like a lot of the Square games from that era, the programming was handled by Iranian-American programmer Nasser Gabelli. And there was a programming bug that caused the Ultima spell, which everyone refers to as the ultimate magic in the game's story, to be completely underpowered. And Sakaguchi asked him to fix this, and Nasser instead insisted that an old spell that was locked away for generations would naturally be weaker than modern spells made with modern knowledge.
That's why Holy's so much better than Ultima.
Right.
Don't you know? Duh, we have better spell technology now.
Yeah, and Sakaguchi did not accept this answer and was like, no, you have to fix it. But it was never fixed before the game released. So the spell is just broken. The way that the spell is supposed to work, this is just a little quick technical gameplay spoiler. It's supposed to be based off of all of your stats. So like if you have 3 spells on that character and he's only ever used 1 weapon and they're all maxed out, then Ultima is supposed to be basically maxed. But if you have a full inventory of level 1 spells and you've used each weapon once and it's level 2, Ultima is supposed to be really bad.
In other words, the way most people would, at some point, you probably equip an axe and be like, what does an axe do on this guy for a couple battles? And you're like, I didn't like that. Let's go back.
Unfortunately, the way that it does work is any spells or weapons that you've never used on that character count as level 1 towards Ultima. So no matter what you do, unless you somehow max out everything, Ultima's going to be really bad. At least that's my understanding of how it works. I'm not going to say that I went into the code myself, but that's my understanding.
Now, was that fixed in the Pixel Remaster? Because I didn't see a huge discrepancy between Ultima and Holy. Maybe my Holy just wasn't high enough level.
I believe it has been fixed in later revisions. Okay. I think from GBA forward, Ultima is fixed.
It's surprisingly hard to find, because there were some parts of the game where I needed a guide, and it's hard to find guides for this game because the different versions fix and change a lot of things.
True, yes.
It feels like, I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels like more so than other Final Fantasies. And I think a lot of it's just other Final Fantasies have had the luxury of many more versions and iterations.
True.
Than Final Fantasy 2. Like, this has been remade slightly less than more popular ones like Final Fantasy 4, which there's 30 or 40 versions of.
Well, actually, it's about the same as Final Fantasy 1 and 4. Yeah.
It just, I guess it doesn't feel like it. I guess you've got the GBA one, you got the Wonder Swan one, you've got the feature
PS1.
phones. I don't know. Yeah. True. Well, maybe I'm full of shit then.
No, I think it's more that they, with the other games in the series, they could mostly just refine it because they had used a lot of the same mechanics in a lot of those games.
Yeah, so this feels like shit was just taken out at some. And I have some complaints with stuff that was just like, oh, it's not there now. And I was like, oh, well, I was following this guide, and the thing I was doing doesn't exist anymore at all.
Yeah, which also does happen in the Final Fantasy 3 Pixel Remaster a couple times. But there's only that one remake of Final Fantasy 3, so it's a lot easier to find information on it. Let's
finish development. Yeah, go ahead.
So there were some other complications that occurred during development, some bugs, some glitches, some problems. A lot of those were caused because Gabelli's Japanese visa expired again, so he was sent back to the U.S. But they did manage to complete the game, and by that I mean compile it, not actually fix all of its bugs.
Right. It went out the door.
Yeah, and then they were able to ship it, and it was on stores in Japan 1 day before the original game's first anniversary.
That's so fast.
Yeah, it's like a 9-month development time or something like that.
What was it? Do you know the development time for the original game?
Around the same.
That was? Okay, all right. I guess it's just NES development times.
It feels ridiculous compared to today's development time. There was a planned English release. It was advertised at trade shows. They had box art for it. Everything was ready to pretty much go. But it was canceled in favor of FF4 on Super NES because the Super NES was already available and they didn't want to still be publishing NES games when they already had a Super NES game to put out.
Right.
The prototype, which was partially translated by Kaoru Moriyama, who had also done the official translations of Final Fantasy IV and Secret of Mana, was later leaked online, featuring several questionable and bad translations. My favorite is they always call the pirates Paredes. And I love that. I am so sad that Paredes aren't in every version of the game.
The Paredes.
It's just so charming. It also already had the graphics modified to conform with Nintendo of America's policies of the era. So things like Stars of David and crosses and such were removed. There were some
clothes on any naked women, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Just little things like that. There was a quote, somebody interviewed Moriyama at some point, and they said that they had so very limited memory capacity that they could use for each game, so it was never really translating, but rather chopping up all the information and then cramming it back in, and also their boss had no understanding and putting in extra work for English versions at the time, so it was just whatever you can put into English, that's the game.
Yeah.
And so that is why there was some issues. And granted, they may have also done another translation sweep before release. All we have
I mean, we don't know that this probably was not a production version. They probably didn't get it that far,
but it wasn't that far off from the production quality we saw with some of Square's other games of that era, so it was probably pretty close to release.
Let's talk presentation. Obviously I've only played the GBA and Pixel Remaster versions, both of which look like Final Fantasy. The portraits look a little
16-bit versions of Final Fantasy. Yeah,
I noticed the portraits in both look a little more I don't know, adult, more realistic, more closer to key art.
Yeah.
Than some of the other ones. That was definitely something I noticed even when I played it back on GBA back in the days. I booted it up, and Final Fantasy 1 on GBA felt kind of cute almost.
Yeah.
And then Final Fantasy 2, like all of the art and the portraits and everything were really like not cute.
They're more dramatic.
Very, very serious. Yeah. A much more dramatic feeling game in many regards.
Yeah, melodramatic at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The art style and art quality varies drastically between every release of the game. The NES game looks very much like Final Fantasy 1 plus character portraits.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to PSP, it looks just like the PSP ports of FF1 and FF4.
Yeah, they're all pretty homogenized by then.
Basically, everything since the Wonder Swan has been very homogenized with whatever the current release of Final Fantasy 1 looks like. Because it's always been released alongside Final Fantasy 1 every time that Final Fantasy 1 has been re-released.
It's weird. I'm playing through these Pixel remasters in order. I did Final Fantasy 1, then I did Final Fantasy 2, and I jumped straight into 3, and the graphics in 3 feel so different after the Pixel remasters 1 and 2.
Well, 1 and 2, their Pixel remasters were based heavily on the GBA ports from 20 years ago now. Whereas Final Fantasy 3 is a wholly original thing. All that sprite art is from scratch based on the NES version. So
I'll say I like it better than the sprite work in 1 and 2. It just has more character. I don't know what it is. I like it a lot better, which is nice. Which isn't to say I hated the sprite work of Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on Pixel Remastered. Just not my favorites.
Yeah.
Especially as, and we haven't even gotten to the soundtrack yet. The soundtrack in this game, every fucking song is like season finale Game of Thrones song. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
I kept switching back and forth between the arrangement and the original music, and they're both just completely ridiculously dramatic all of the time.
Yeah, if I remember right, this game has a sound story CD where it's got like a whole play and everything involved with it. And it's pretty ridiculous. But Uematsu did go over the top with the melodrama in the soundtrack. That is my take on the soundtrack of this game. Is it's
in like
over the top.
Not to spoil anything, the story in it is pretty dark.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel as dark as like later Final Fantasies.
True.
But for the time for an NES game,
Oh,
crazy dark. So I guess the soundtrack kind of matches. It just feels like some of the story beats in like 4 and 6 are just, especially 6, like we did a whole episode about it, but holy shit, that game is dark as fuck at some points.
But it's also goofy as hell at some points.
And it likes to be goofy too. And so something about it makes this just feel so much more like angsty teenager try. You know what it reminds me of? It tonally reminds me of Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A lot. There's really, that's where the comparison's in, but just tonally of this, like, very, like, no, it's very serious and dark and after something.
I feel like 8 has more lighthearted moments than 2 does. 2 really feels like it left all the lightheartedness at the door.
There's almost no goofiness. No. And even you feel like there's moments where they're going to get goofy and then they don't. And you're like, oh, I guess we're straight facing that. All right.
Yeah, the closest they get is introducing chocobos. And then they don't use them at all.
No, the game has nothing to do. They're like, here's one. You're like, what do you do with it? Well, no, you just you can go to the town, and that's all it does.
Yeah. I will give the NES version credit, despite the fact that it just looks like Final Fantasy 1. It did introduce the battle format where the combat boxes were at the bottom of the screen with all the stats and everything.
Okay.
Which you didn't have in the first game because it had like the 4 different boxes on the one side and the 6 different boxes that popped up at the bottom. Whereas this did everything much more cleanly in comparison.
Let's jump into gameplay because we got a lot left to cover here. So it bears mentioning that like many sophomoric efforts on the NES, there were no established norms.
Yeah.
So the same way Mario 2, Castlevania 2, Ninja Gaiden 2, American Mario 2 can all try weird shit.
Yeah.
This tried weird shit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few things that carried over.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was new stuff.
Yeah. That was immediately abandoned.
Right. In the next game, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's weird. Final Fantasy 2 tonally feels a lot like Final Fantasy 8.
Yeah.
And then Final Fantasy 3 tonally feels a lot like Final Fantasy 9, where it's this sort of we're returning to this traditional form. It's very strange how cyclical these game series feel.
Right.
It's very strange. Stuff that they added that we kept. Emphasis on storytelling, except for kind of the third game. The third game tries. It tries to have story.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, Papa, and you care about him, and all 4 of these children speak together in unison, I guess. And it's just weird.
Have one spokesman. The other 3 are mute.
Is that what it is? I can never tell if it's supposed to be all of them talking or just one of them speaking.
There are a couple times where they speak to each other, but it doesn't designate which one is speaking.
Yeah, it's like
here's one orphan speaking, here's a different orphan speaking.
It reminds me of in really early Ninja Turtles comics. They were kind of treated interchangeably, like they didn't have distinct personalities or different colors that they wore because it was black and white. And so the joke was that they were sort of interchangeable. Yeah. It feels like that, where you're just like, which one is Michelangelo? And you're like, it doesn't fucking matter. They're all Michelangelo. Like, it doesn't. Yeah, pick one. Chocobos were added here, which is cool. We're Chocobo. There's one.
There's one Chocobo forest. You can get the one Chocobo there. You can go almost everywhere in the world on it, and then that's it.
He's just there in the woods for no reason. No one talks about him. There's no story. There's no quest. You just walk into a clearing, and you're like, is that a big bird? And then you can ride him.
Have you seen the art that Amano made for the Chocobo in 2?
No.
Looks nothing at all like a Chocobo. Looks like a pink ostrich.
Front and back row in combat, which adds a little bit of tactical depth. I've always enjoyed the front back row. Added a few new spells, like the aforementioned Ultima spell, which didn't work properly, but it was there.
Yeah, technically there.
It added my least enjoyed feature in any JRPG ever of all time, which is temporary party members based on the story. Not only that, but they reduce your party size to 3 to accommodate the 4th member, which is a thing the next game, Final Fantasy 3, immediately dropped. Yeah. And immediately it was like, hey, here's a party member. The princess joins you in the cave. Yeah. But she's not in the party, and you still get to have all 4 of your party members.
Right, exactly.
And so, did you send me this art? Yeah. Oh, my God. This is some weird-ass fucking...
Like, its feet look backwards.
First of all, it's 4 stories tall. It's pink and fleshy.
Yeah. Its head looks like a boomerang. Weirdest.
This is some weird-ass shit,
Mono
man.
did some weird shit.
It looks like... Oh, man. He did do some really weird shit.
Yeah.
Very weird shit. I'm hung up on that. They added key items, which were a thing. They also, and this is getting into stuff that didn't stick around. Right, now, those are all the ideas that this introduced that they kept. Yeah. Everything else, they were like, maybe that's better without that.
Right.
They did this keyword system, and I've seen it referred to as passwords.
Yeah, some translations
I was looking
call it passwords. Yeah,
and basically, in conversation, you can learn new words that show up as highlighted in the text and then specifically ask about them. And I think the intention here was to make it feel like you're actually having conversations, like social interactions. Yeah. But it's so limited and locked down that it just turns into, guess the word you're supposed to say to this NPC.
Right. And in the Pixel Remaster especially, it highlights any words you can actually say to them.
Yes.
So it's you don't even have
pointless.
To guess. Yeah.
It's it's annoying. It is a little useful in that you can re-elicit certain responses to reread certain things.
True.
Which is kind of nice, although I would have been just as happy with like a Dragon Quest style remember thing where you can remember a dialogue box or something like that.
And there's also a couple of times where you can use a keyword on an inanimate object, and that makes no sense to me whatsoever.
No, it does not. So the keyword system, I think it was a really cool idea.
Yeah.
I don't think it adds much. I think
the
at the time,
was poor.
I think at the time on the NES, awesome idea. Right. Now, it doesn't really hold up very well. I think it was a cool idea though. Yeah. And we kind of touched on this too, the exploration. Most of the world is just immediately available. It's mostly one big continent. There's a couple small little bits, but it's mostly one huge wraparound continent.
Yep.
And you can really just
in a weird donut-shaped world.
Yep. You can just kind of fuck yourself by getting into really hard fights really early on.
That is true.
And it becomes a problem.
And that's especially a problem in the NES version of the game, because if you fight those harder monsters and you boost your stats, then going back and fighting the monsters you should be fighting, because they're a lower rank, it'll lower your stats.
God damn it, Final Fantasy 2.
Yeah.
I did note, and I'm guessing this is a revision of the later games. I noticed that the overworld in general seems to level up as you gain power.
Yes, there are a couple of specific story points where the enemies on the overworld are completely replaced based on the story. I think it's after the Cyclone is when that happens.
Which is that's when I noticed it, because I've been turning I've been turning encounters off a lot, just to, sometimes you're like running back and forth and you're like, I'm not quite sure where I want to go, and you don't want to have to battle the whole time.
Yeah.
And then I'd turned them back on. I was like, oh, these aren't goblins. Like I was right outside the main castle area, and I was like, oh, this is tough shit.
Yeah.
Traversal in the first game, I feel like the travel options were kind of spaced out pretty evenly throughout the story, so that you felt this natural curve into the areas in the world you can progress to. This one, immediately they're like, here's a canoe.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, then why did you even put these fucking rivers anywhere?
Right.
And then immediately they're like, here's a snowmobile, but you only use it once.
Yeah. It goes to one exact place. You need it right now, and then you'll never touch it again.
And then there is an airship and a ship that you can pay to move between certain areas.
Yeah.
But you don't actually unlock the ship until much later in the game. And the airship is unlocked at like the literal end.
Basically the last dungeon. And the ship can only take you to 2 areas that you couldn't have gotten to on foot.
Right.
And the airship, if you pay to go somewhere, it will only take you to areas you could have gotten to on foot.
Yeah, so it just is a time saver. Like traversal-wise, this is one of my complaints, like actual complaints with Final Fantasy II, other than just like, that's weird, is that the traversal feels so much more restrictive and limited in a world where, again, you can already fucking walk everywhere. Yeah. Give me the airship. Give me the ship. Right. Like, it's frustrating.
But then why would you walk everywhere if they just give you everything?
Exactly. I don't want to walk anywhere. I want to fly in a fucking airship. Dungeons are chock full of empty trap rooms. And if you're playing like me, where you do a bunch of grinding at the beginning of the dungeon, then turn encounters off for the rest of the dungeon, you don't know why they're there. You're like, why are there all these empty rooms?
Yeah.
But it's because they're supposed to have enemy encounters in them. And when you turn encounters on, you realize, like, oh, there's enemy encounters in these rooms.
It's a higher encounter rate with harder enemies. And it always puts you a few steps into the room so that you have to walk out. And almost always you're going to hit an enemy. If not,
this is Final Fantasy II's evolution of the excessive amount of monster chests in the first Final Fantasy, where they're like, hey, we got to get you somewhere. This feels a little more time wasty than because like the monster chests, you're like, at least after I kill this monster, I get the treasure.
Yeah, but in the first game, there were the treasures themselves didn't have the monsters in them. It was the tile in front of the treasure that had the monster. So if you kept stepping on it, you would keep encountering it.
But don't do that.
That was the grinding cheat in the first game. This is the grinding cheat in the second game.
Yeah. So, but it feels a little weird, especially in later ones with quality of life things added to them. And it feels a little like, oh, guess the door.
Yeah, it feels
kind of frustrating,
honestly.
Yeah, it does. Just dungeon traversal wise, it does feel mean. I will say the dungeons themselves, the first game really seems to like these big symmetrical layouts. In the second game, I feel like they wanted to do it a little more maze-like, but they didn't quite lean into it hard enough. So most of the dungeon layouts are still really, really simple.
Yeah.
I feel like there were a little more creative dungeon layouts in the first game than this one. This one just relied really heavily on like, hey, guess the door. And there's a lot. Most dungeons have at least one section where it's like 5 doors in a row.
Yep.
And they're like, pick one.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was cute one time, but all the way into the last dungeon, come on.
And there's like 3, maybe 4 random little bonus rooms that have some chests in them, and every other one is just a trap room.
Yeah, it got to a point where I began skipping doors.
Yeah,
because you can tell by the layout which door is going to be the one.
Yeah,
it's usually the one farthest away from you. The one right by the door you just came through, that's not going to be the right door. It's a chest. So I'm sure I ended up missing a couple chests for it, but
well, you missed your.
It was just faster. I did. Okay, we're going to talk about the blood sword later.
We'll get to that.
It was an ordeal. Let's talk combat, though.
Yes.
This is your standard turn-based JRPG, where you select items, either spells and items and attacks out of the menus, and then you execute them as it goes through. But
it did have you put in all of your commands for your entire party at once, and then it all plays out. It's not like it stops the action when it's your turn.
Malboros were introduced here, but they didn't have their bad breath attack. But I think chimeras have bad breath.
Yes.
Which is, I was so confused. I kept fighting Malboros, and I was like, I gotta kill them real fast before they bad breath me. And then later I was fighting like 15 chimeras at once, and I got bad breathed a bunch. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? What planet am I on?
There's also
that was a weird one.
An issue in many of the versions of the game where the effect rate for status elements was at or near 100%. So if an enemy could give you a status ailment, you did. You got it. That was yours now. And it was especially an issue with enemies like Cockatrice and Death Rider who have either stone or instant death attacks.
Yep.
Because that just meant your entire party died. Period. There's no way you can get around it.
Yeah. Let's talk stats, because this is kind of what Final Fantasy II is famous for.
Yes.
Experience points and levels don't exist. Stats are developed based on use. Right. So to get better with axes, you use an axe. To gain more HP, you get hit more. Yep. To train a spell, you use that spell more, which sounds like a cool idea on paper. At least for like weapon stats, it kind of makes sense. Okay, I'm using my axe more, I get better with the axe. But then there's some spells where it becomes extremely hard to level them up, like the life spell, for example.
Or Asuna.
Or Asuna, because you have to die or get a status effect for it to work.
Yep.
Max HP.
You can cast both of those spells on somebody and have it miss and still get credit for it.
True.
So you can just waste magic for a long time. And those spells will level up, but that means that you're just wasting magic for a long time.
Yeah, it becomes the actual grinding in this game often is you getting in pointless situations and spamming pointless things rather than just, because in the first game the way you did grinding was by playing the game the way it's supposed to be played.
Right.
In this one, the way you do grinding is by kind of playing the game a way you wouldn't naturally play it, because why would you cast Asuna 70 times in one battle? It doesn't make sense, you know?
There was a glitch on the original version that carried over to the PlayStation and WonderSwan versions where if you input a command and then immediately canceled and went back to the previous character, that command you just put in still counted towards your stat growth.
Oh.
So if you had 4 people in your party, for the first 3 people, if you cast life and then cancel and then cast life and then cancel and cast life and then cancel and just keep doing that for like 20, 30 minutes, when you finally input your actual commands and take your turn, you will gain a level in life that battle without ever having used the MP. They have fixed that in all the recent versions, but that was a known strategy back then, which again is not the way you're supposed to play the game.
Yeah.
But it is the most efficient and effective way to level up your magic and your attacks.
I will say early on, I didn't like this system because I was like, why wouldn't I just give everyone dual swords and fire and blizzard and cure and life and put them in the front row and have everyone just be equally good at everything?
Right.
And that's how I played most of the game. And then near the end, it started getting hard, even with my boosts and shit on. Because one, Final Fantasy II is it's a really hard Final Fantasy game in general. And it does kind of some mean shit, which is thankfully mitigated with the boosts and everything. Also, the Pixel Remaster lets you turn on a mode where you get fixed HP increases, which actually comes back to bite you in the ass at the very end, I learned. Yep. But by the end of the game, I was actually kind of building out my party, and I was having a good time sort of building their skills. Yeah. But what I didn't like is there's these moments that I expect in Final Fantasy games. The moment you get Excalibur, the moment you get Flare, the moment you get the like best version of something and you're like, hell yeah, the Flare spell, the Holy spell, Ultima, this is going to be awesome. And then you cast it and it's like, Ultima level 1, 12 damage.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, right. Ultima sucks until I grind it up to a high level. Yeah. And so at that point, you're like, fucking fire does more damage than Ultima right now because I've been using fire the whole game. And so that part kind of sucks. It takes a little bit of just, and this is just me, this is just what I'm bringing to the game, is this expectation of what Final Fantasy is, which is, oh, you finally got the Thunder Spear or whatever the best spear in the game is, but you've not used spears on any of your guys. And so it sucks now. And you're like, oh, all right, I guess my literal starting sword is still better because I've got level 15 in swords and level 1 in spears. Yeah. So that's kind of... So I'll say that by the end of it, I was kind of getting into the theory crafting of building out my party and their skills and different combinations that I could do, because being this free, you can do weird shit. By the end, my frontline heavy damage dealer was also my main healer, which is kind of weird for Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
You can do kind of non-Final Fantasy archetypes with it, which is cool, but you gotta plan it.
Right.
Or do a shitload of grinding when you make that decision.
I'd do the shitload of grinding.
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah. But again, this is something that immediately they remedied in Final Fantasy III. by going, okay, well, how about it's jobs again, but everybody gets lots of jobs and you can change jobs.
Right.
So when you decide you want your guy to be like this, he just is. And then he builds up from a reasonable baseline.
Right. Instead of you having to level up every single stat, ability, spell every single time.
So I still don't know how I feel about this system.
Now, did you ever figure out how it actually awards you points?
No, I don't know. I mean, you get it used on how much you use the things, right? What do you mean?
Yes and no. But if you fight something that is weaker than you, that is a lower rank enemy, it might take 75 uses of that spell or weapon for it to go up a level. But if you're fighting
notice
enemies that are higher rank, it'll only take 16 or 20 uses of that thing for it to go up.
I did notice when I was grinding at the end, I was grinding mostly right in front of the last, like I'm standing in front of the last boss, literally a square away, killing everything, and I was grinding there. I was grinding there a lot because my stats are going up. Also, it was fire and ice Gygas or giants, whatever they call them. And those were just kind of
rank 6 enemy, I think.
Yeah, those were easier than other high level enemies that would do status effects.
Right.
And so I just did a lot of grinding there, and I was noticing because I would teleport out to go back to town to get provisions or buy this spell I forgot or try different equipment, and I was trying different loadouts literally at the last boss.
Yeah.
And so that was. I noticed that. I was like, higher level enemies seem to make it go quicker.
Right.
I don't think I put 2 and 2 fully together, but
and the thing is, so there's like 16 or 32 points, I think, for each ability to go up to its next level, right? And if you're fighting a low rank enemy, you have to finish like 20 casts of it in that battle to get 1 point. But if you finish that battle without doing that, you get 0 points for that battle.
Yeah.
So even if you were using that spell or using that weapon against that weak enemy, you got no credit at all for it unless you did it at least that many times during that battle. Whereas if you're fighting the higher rank enemies, you only have to use it once to get credit for that battle. So it's and the game never tells you any of this. And there's nothing in game to show you whether or not you're getting credit until the battle is over. So it can be frustrating to learn that.
It can be. I think by the end, I was getting to really specialized characters. I was also getting to be like, hey, I want everyone to have Berserk level 5 and Haste level 5.
Yeah.
And I could do that without having all 4 of them be the same job class, which was cool.
Right.
It's a cool thing to really get to theory craft with shit unlimited. Because even later games with like materia and stuff, you're still kind of limited in what combinations you can and can't put together. You got to have equipment that fits all the different slots and everything. And this is just like, we don't fucking care. You give anyone anything. Anyone can have any weapon. Anyone can have any spell. Anyone can do anything. Whoever, it doesn't matter. And it has to be the most open Final Fantasy system out of any of them.
Right.
And in that regard, you get all the good and the bad
that has
comes
somewhat
with
in common with Final Fantasy VIII as well.
Yeah, extremely open and very breakable.
Yeah.
Like by the time I did get to the end and be like, oh, I actually have to theory craft and figure out my party. I can't just have everyone be frontline swords and level 10 cure. And you start to realize like, oh, not only can I figure some stuff out, but I can kind of break this shit. Like, I mean, if this is broken now.
If you have a blood sword, you can just have everybody be frontline swords.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. But I miss that there blood sword. Before we get into final thoughts, do we have anything else we want to cover that we didn't?
Now we'll get to the bonus dungeons in the next episode. We can do that.
Okay. As far as final thoughts, just on gameplay, I didn't love it at first, and I grew into it. I grew into it to a point that not soon, but I'd like to do a second playthrough sometime and really plan my party specifically.
Yeah.
I'd say if you're like a big theory crafting person, then this is like candy. Like, I'll also say if you go in blind, because I wanted to go in blind. I like going into these blind when I can. I did have to check a walkthrough a few times because sometimes the story is like, go talk to this one guy in this one village in this one place in this one fucking corner, this one room,
right?
Or nothing will progress. And it's like, well, shit, I guess I got to go fucking. And they're always just like, yeah, go find Steve, and you're like, who? Who the fuck is Steve?
No,
I go, Steve.
You gotta go find
Steve
Paul.
Lives in fucking Paul. I forgot where his house was every time.
It's in Finn.
Yeah, I know that. it's in the bottom left. I always go to the top left, and I'm like, this is a church. Where's Paul?
Paul live in the church.
Even right there at the end. I'll say this. If you want to go into the game blind, whenever you, and this is for people that want minimal spoilers, just look up when to get the blood sword because it is missable. I'm not going to tell you in this episode why it's important.
If you're on PS1, it's not missable.
If you're on GBA or later, it is missable. So just look that up in whatever version you're playing, how to get blood sword, Final Fantasy 2, GBA, Pixel Remaster, whatever version you're playing, and know when that trigger is, because depending on how you build your party, the final boss can be insanely difficult.
True. Yes.
Especially if you're playing the Pixel Remaster with the HP boost on, which I was.
Unless you have blood sword, then it's
into details of why next episode. But if you're like, hey, listen to the first episode, see if it sounds fun, and I'm gonna go play it now, then just know about the blood sword, know where to get it, because that's your get out of jail free card.
In every other Final Fantasy it shows up.
Yeah, it's literally get out of jail free card for the last boss, which you might need if you built your party badly, like I did.
I do like that they give Furion the blood sword in Dissidia. Just as a reference to that,
As far as final thoughts, I enjoyed the gameplay of this game. I at first it felt too open. Like I kind of come to Final Fantasy to sort of be locked down into like, not choice paralysis and be like, hey, this guy's a black mage and I know how to treat a black mage and what to do with a black mage. But when they're just like, everyone's black mage and a warrior and a thief and a monk and a this and a that, and I'm like, I don't.
Sometimes they talk to beavers.
Yeah, sometimes you get to go talk to beavers. But yeah, I ended up liking it. I would like to kind of play this again and kind of theory craft it from the beginning a little bit more. I do feel really restricted with the 3-person party system because your fourth party gets like, it's not long periods of time before they're changed out. It's quick. Like people are rapid fire in and out of your fourth slot to the point that you just start ignoring them because there's no fucking point in training them because they're going to go away.
Exactly.
So that felt restrictive. I'll probably get my fix by moving on into Romancing Saga 2, which I have the remake of already sitting on my shelf, and just kind of get that Final Fantasy 2 fix. It's interesting to see this stuff where so much of it started. And I think gameplay wise, it was engaging. It was fun. It was definitely one of the more challenging Final Fantasy games, even with all the boosts. So I had a good time gameplay wise playing it.
I'm going to complain about one gameplay thing real quick.
Sure.
The Basuna spell.
Is that the one that gets rid of status effects that would go away at the end of battle?
Yes.
Or the one? Yeah, that's what it is.
It's really stupid.
I can't figure out what the fuck it's supposed to. Doesn't Asuna get rid of everything?
No, Asuna does not cure those specific status ailments.
That's goofy as hell.
Yeah, and also neither Asuna nor Basuna will cure most things until they're at least level 8.
Yeah, I always just used items. I just bought 99 of everything and just cured with items.
Yeah, I did. Those are my big complaints about the game. Is the magic system. A lot of the spells are completely useless until they're level 8, and the only way to get them to level 8 is to keep spamming
just to
them.
grind them out. Yep. I will. Healing in this game is particularly difficult. It's hard to get healing high enough level, and even when it is, it doesn't do a lot. The healing suite being so restrictive, I think, is really where a lot of the challenge of this game comes from.
The last few times I played it, I had all 4 characters with level 16 cure by the end of the game.
Oh, my highest spell at all by the end of the game, and I guess it's worth mentioning because we both play these games so differently. My highest weapon skill was 13.
Okay.
My highest spell out of all of them was 11.
That's not bad.
And that was after grinding to it, because when I got to the last boss, my highest weapon skill was 11 and my highest spell skill was 8.
Yeah, my the spells, I usually get cure up to 16 pretty quickly just because I use it for all of my healing.
Yeah. Now, the auto battle and continue auto battle function of the Pixel remasters is particularly nice for setting up your auto battle and then grinding particular skills and spells.
Yep, that's how I got it in life up to level 8.
It does definitely kind of improve Final Fantasy 2 in ways that I think the Pixel remasters may or may not improve the other respective games as much. So it really is a massive improvement for this title.
Right.
Because of that, I feel like I keep interrupting how you feel about gameplay.
No, I agree with you. That's those particular changes for the Pixel Remaster. I don't even know if they intended to make the game that much easier with them, but it does.
Yeah,
it does.
It's still tough even with them. I had every boost on the whole game, and I still struggled at the end. It was still tough.
I had everybody at about 7,000 HP before I got to the last dungeon, and I didn't even try to. Maria especially, she had more HP than anyone. I don't know why she kept getting HP. She wasn't even hurt.
My highest HP when I first got to the end boss was 4,000. And after when I finally beat him, my highest HP I think was the high 6,000s, and the rest were like 4 and 5.
When I played the Famicom version, I don't remember if I ever finished it or not, but I don't think I ever got anyone above 2,000 HP.
Yeah,
and even that was an absolute struggle to get that far.
Yeah. So gameplay wise, I enjoyed this. I think it's fun in a really weird, different way that takes a little bit of learning.
I definitely recommend the Pixel Remaster or the GBA version if you're going to play any.
Absolutely. I think they're the least mean. I really kind of lean heavily. This is one, we just had the Pixel Remaster episode. This is one out of the 6 that I think this might be the best version, even if it's missing some of the bonus content of Final Fantasy II.
From the Pixel Remaster editions.
I think of the 6 in the Pixel Remasters, this is one that I can most easily say, no, for sure, this is the best version of Final Fantasy II that you should play.
Yeah.
Unless you're just a masochist, I guess. I don't know. But if you are a masochist, you might like our Patreon at patreon.com/retrowarriors, where you can get talking wizards and other things whenever Patreon support decides to get back to me and fix the RSS feed that was broken for like 3 or 4 days, and that wasn't stressful at all while I was out of town. Fucking A. Patreon support is useless. Patreon, if you're listening, you're useless.
If it's useless to the creators, just imagine how great it is for the subscribers.
I emailed them and was like, my RSS is broken, and they emailed me back and said it's fixed, and I was like, okay. Going forward, was there something wrong? And they're like, yeah, it's fixed. And I was like, great. Here's the other problem I'm having. And they're like, good luck. And I was like, oh, all right then. You're welcome for all the fees you've taken out of all of our Patreon money for all these years. Good Patreon. Luck. Anyway, if you want to subscribe on Patreon,
if you want to support that business,
because we're locked in, we can't leave. You can be cool like the following people that we're going to thank for their money, starting with First.
I'm glad you put that one at top.
It was literally by accident. Also, completely natural.
Also, Dane McMillan,
Frank Grimes,
Dave Nelson,
Charles G,
Chase Deanda,
a PJ Pizza Ass Barfly.
Pizzazz. It was Pizzazz.
PJ Pizza Ass.
You made that same joke on the Sega episode. It's Chris Minocci. And 4eCare.
Are all patrons that give us money on Patreon, the website where you can subscribe to us and give us money, and everything's fine and it works fine and it's great. It's all good. Everything's fine now. It's fantastic. If you liked this episode, tune in next week. And if you didn't, fuck you anyway, I guess.
That's how we keep our numbers up.
It's called Retention Saturn, okay? Stay tuned after the ending theme. Our producer Guy is going to be here for the after party, the after show, the afterbirth. I don't remember what we call it. There's the something. We'll figure it out. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together. Hi, welcome to the after party with our producer Guy.
Gross, no. I mean, it's natural. It's not gross, I guess, but...
yeah, see, there you go.
Yeah.
Hi, Guy.
And as always, fuck you anyway.
That's my new sign off. Fuck you anyway.
Oh, man. How's it going?
Oh, I just did a podcast and stuff. I'm a little sweaty, but,
What else is new?
Yeah, that's your secret cap.
I'm like fart boxing this office area too. Right. That's not good. But other than sweaty and gassy, I'm fine. Just normal business as usual.
Sweaty and gassy are my favorite dwarves.
Yeah. They weren't shown in the movie as much. They were off camera for a lot of it.
Saturn, I need your help.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
I do.
Well, you remember in the private Discord channel, we were talking about existential crises?
Yeah.
And I happened to mention that my most recent one was kicked off when within like the same week, Dave Coulier and James Vanderbeek announced that they had cancer. And both Andrew and Justin were like, who the fuck are those people?
Yeah, no, I know the Vanderbeek guy because he was on that show Dawson's Creek. I never saw the show, but I remember the theme song, and I remember thinking I always assumed he would look like a bird because his name is Beak.
Well, you have to look like what your name is, right?
That was it. That was everything I know about James Vanderbeek.
Yeah, the world works on cartoon logic like that.
Did Dawson live at a creek in the show? I didn't watch the show.
I didn't watch the show either.
There was a creek on his property, yes.
Oh.
Did he like kill people there? Like what?
No, he went to high school. He wanted to be a director. No.
He wanted to direct
I'm not doing this
movies. Occasionally, Guy will let me gaslight him, and then occasionally he just goes, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it this time. You can't make me do it.
I'm glad
you're not pulling me offside.
I'm glad he recognizes it that quickly these days. Sometimes he would fall into it for a while first.
Catches on quick.
I think the time that you convinced me that you had never watched Sesame Street was probably about when I stopped believing most of what you say.
That's for the best.
Oh God. I just sound insufferable. I don't know how anybody puts up with this shit.
Yeah, sound that way.
Anyway, that made me feel real old.
But who's that guy?
How do you not know who Dave Coulier is?
I don't know who that is. Who is that?
He was Uncle Jesse, or no, Uncle Joey on Full House.
I don't watch Full House.
He also
right. You're too young, which is what fucking kicked it off.
He also
watched Power Rangers.
Hosted a sketch comedy show for kids called Out of Control, I think was the name.
No, the sketch comedy show for kids was called All That. I did watch that.
Before that.
Oh, yeah, I watched some of that on the YouTubes earlier this week.
Yeah, Out of Control was the one where he
was he the blonde dad on? Because Full House had the three dads.
Yes, he was the
There
blonde
was Bob
one.
Saget, blonde dad, and leather jacket dad.
Yeah, and
I don't know which one of them actually was the dad. One of them had to. Was
Bob
only one
Saget
of them a dad?
Was the actual father. Yes.
All right.
The others were Uncle Jesse and Uncle Joey, implying they were not the father.
Well, the working title was My Three Dads.
No, it's not.
It didn't.
No, that's a different thing.
That's a different show. No, it was My Two Dads was a different show.
Right. No, I was thinking Three Men and a Baby.
There was also My Three Sons, which is the opposite direction.
It's too much math involved.
Yeah.
That was like in the 60s, like a black and white show.
Was many years ago. Dave Coulier was the one who did the Cut It Out thing, and he originated that on Out of Control, which was going back, not a great show. But when I was a little kid, I was like, this is pretty good. This is pretty solid.
Right? Yeah. That's where I landed on YouTube.
Yeah. It aired on Nickelodeon from 84 to 85. So
my wife watched Full House growing up. I did not. Like it was on. Same thing with Saved by the Bell. I was aware of it.
Much Saved by the Bell.
But I didn't watch it. If it wasn't a cartoon or a Powered Ranger, then I was not going to be watching it.
I used to get upset because Power Rangers came on right before Saved by the Bell, and if I wanted to tune over to that channel, I had to watch a couple of minutes of Power Rangers first, and that made me upset.
It could any Sentai or any cartoon, I was on board. If it was just regular humans being like, "Oh, school sucks," like I don't want that.
It's almost like escapism of some sort.
It's the weirdest. It's almost like I had a volatile childhood, and I wanted to be a Beetleborg to escape my parents' divorce.
Maybe you just wanted to be a Beetleborg, though.
I did really badly want to be a Beetleborg. Oh man! So I had all the toys and everything. They were shitty.
I did not realize that I was offending you when I made some joke about Beetleborgs a couple weeks ago. It was when I was talking about the RoboCop remake. How he looks like a Beetleborg.
Yeah, he kind of does look like a Beetleborg. No, I loved Beetleborgs. VR Troopers too. I watched the shit out of VR Troopers.
I hated that one.
Oh man, VR Troopers.
Yeah, I didn't like VR Troopers. That was a knockoff of Power Rangers. Like, no, thank you. Power Rangers.
I loved all that shit, man. Anything Sentai, anything animated. If it wasn't that, I didn't. When I was like 12 or 13, I did watch Boy Meets World.
Yeah, I didn't care for that show.
And that was kind of the only like, kids sitcom that I watched.
Yeah, I never clicked with Boy Meets World. Something about it just
It's like worse Wonder Years.
Yeah, it felt like
I watched the Wonder Years. Yeah, it came on like TV Land. Yeah, I did watch that.
But something about Boy Meets World felt like it was directed towards people just younger than me, and so I just could not click with it.
Maybe people born in like 1988, possibly. Named Justin.
Yeah. Just people named Justin that year, though. Anyone else, fuck them.
Right, and like both those shows start as Savage, so
it's
like,
true.
It just sort of felt like it was a knockoff. Like it was completely different.
Right, yeah.
Started Randy Savage. Yeah.
Like what they updated it, made it a comedy in the 90s, and got the lesser brother.
Yeah. I'm sure he loves being referred to in that way too.
Well,
all the time.
He shouldn't be the lesser brother if he didn't want to be referred to like that.
What's weird is I watched a lot of sitcoms growing up, but it was all like 70s sitcoms and shit. Like I watched a bunch of like I Love Lucy and Bewitched and Green Acres and The Monkees and just
like
random.
None of those have been 70s yet.
Which ones were 70s then?
So I Love Lucy was 50s and 60s.
Right,
Bewitched was 60s. The Monkees was 60s.
Okay.
What else did you just say?
Green Acres was
also
Green Acres.
60s, yeah.
Partridge Family, Brady Bunch.
Those were 70s.
That's 70s.
It's all the same to me. It all came on the same channel in the same block. Like it wasn't a decade apart from me. I was in the 90s. It was all just old. It was in the old TV bin,
I feel like that's how my kids feel about like we're watching like Star Wars right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
there's just like, old and new Star Wars, and that's it.
Yeah, we haven't even got to new Star Wars yet, but like I just feel like in general it's going to be squeezed into like a singular bucket of before my time.
Yeah, original trilogy, prequel trilogy, all the same. It's all just old Star Wars.
Oh no.
Yep. All just old bad Star Wars.
It burns us. Oh God. My daughter acts like the 90s. She talks about the 90s the way that I talk about like the Renaissance.
Yeah.
She's like, it must be from the 90s. I'm like, don't say it like that, dude.
It's worse when kids say it as the 1900s.
Oh, God, yeah.
I heard somebody at work say, do you still have like those old PlayStation games from the 1900s?
From the 1900s?
I was like, oh, God, technically, I guess, yeah.
It's rough, man.
I like telling my kids that I'm older than Google.
That's true. I remember when Google was the new thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always having to explain to my kid that like what life was like before the internet was prevalent.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain that like, no, we had internet from like 9-10 years old for me anyway, onward. But like it wasn't like the internet.
Yeah,
it was not. You had to go sit down at a computer and you could get on and look at one guy complaining about Babylon 5 and that's all that was there, and then you just left, and like that was you couldn't
there
buy
were badgers and mushrooms.
Yeah,
true. It's true.
And gerbils
later.
A little later than Babylon 5 guy, but then it came at a later date.
Yeah, my earliest internet era was mostly news groups and the occasional web forum and web rings. That's the part that I remember the most.
Web rings and IRC. That was
a lot of IRC back then.
That was it, man.
Anyway. My first internet experience, well, not first experience, but my like sort of core memory experiences revolve around like Joe Cool cartoons and Strong Bad emails. Really.
I don't remember Joe Cool. I remember Strong Bad, but I was never a big fan.
Wait, maybe Joe Cool is Snoopy. Whatever had the gerbil in the microwave game.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
Oh no.
Hey, Guy, I don't want to prompt you, but you were going to talk about BGG Con. That was you were all excited to bring it up on the Afterbirth.
Why? Why do you guys say it like that?
All right. What he's doing today.
It's Joe cartoon. Okay.
Oh.
Anyway.
I vaguely remember
that. Yeah, no, I just wrote down Dave Coulier again.
Just now, you're just sitting there and you just wrote down Dave Coulier. You're just thinking about him?
Yeah, I guess it's under Dave Coulier. Yeah, BGG Con. It was fun. Yeah. I'd never been to a gaming convention, I would say.
Yeah.
I've been to Comic-Con in Dallas or whatnot.
Yeah, I've been to that one too. That's very much like a shopping. There's a couple panels, but mostly you're there to buy shit and walk around.
Well, not when I went. I was there like specifically to meet Leonard Nimoy and go to.
Oh yeah, I guess they do the little meetup booths too, where you can like get in line and meet celebrities. I forget about those.
I got to listen to John Wesley Shipp talk about things.
Who's that? The guy that invented the ship?
No, he played the Flash in the 90s.
He invented.
There was a 90s Flash?
Yeah, it was for like one season, and it got interrupted by the Gulf War. It got interrupted by the start of the Gulf War.
That was a pretty
Gulf War.
Pretty good joke.
The first Gulf War.
Oh.
On that one.
Yeah. So yeah, your first gaming convention.
Yeah. I don't know. I played in a game with you.
Yeah, we were only in one game together out of the 4 I played, weren't we? Well, I mean, we played Root together a bunch, but that was not like a scheduled game.
Yeah, and then there was the game that you were talking about where you were like teenagers or whatever.
Oh yeah, Tales from the Loop. You were like at the next table over waiting for your game to start, but you were like 2 hours early.
Yeah,
I forgot.
So I just sat around and made jokes about things.
Yeah,
about
things I don't want to talk about on the podcast.
Okay.
They were being tempted into the woods by a strange man, and they were teenagers. So
yeah,
so you had a Tucker and Dale situation going on. Is what you're saying?
Whatever happens, the things said at the gaming table are not applicable anywhere else. They only apply in those 4 special 4 hours. They stop existing. It's like Vegas for your brain.
That particular game was all of my friends except me.
Oh. Sounds sad.
Yeah, oddly enough, there were multiple tables. Actually, out of the 4 games I played, only one of them was not fully populated by people from our group that showed up to play.
See, I played 3 games that weren't.
Yeah, you got the real con experience. Like I felt because I my first con I went solo. And then I've never gone with a big enough group to fill a table. Usually it's just like at best I'll be like, oh, Andrew's in this game with me or whatever. And so I was very, very insulated this time around because I got to show up with like a whole group of people. And then you got the real con experience of like, it's me at a table of 6 strangers. And now I got to pretend to be an elf for 4 hours in front of people I've never met.
I pretended to be a lizard first.
Okay. Yeah.
And then a melee or whatever.
Oh yeah, in Fantasy Trip, yeah.
And then a wizard there, and then a transformer.
Yeah,
there was a transformer. That was fun. I had this big old rifle.
Yeah, that was a fun game. We played it was the Transformers RPG, which I don't know. Like I don't not give a shit about the Transformers, but I'm not like into the Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like several people at the table were like really hardcore into the Transformers.
Yeah.
And I felt like a little bit of a fake fan sitting there for some of it because I was like, I don't know what's happening. They turned into cars. And that was about
we're like spouting off like names and he's like, oh, look, it's Laserbeak. And you're like, okay. And everybody's like, oh my God, Laserbeak.
Wait.
At the beginning
is Laserbeak an actual name for a Transformer?
Yeah, he's one of the little cassette tape guys that goes inside a Soundwave.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
Little mini cons. There was a Panther one. There's a bunch of them.
I was never.
I learned about some new ones in this game. And at the beginning of the game, we sat down and the GM was like, he goes, I assume everyone's familiar with the Transformers. And I went, it's like a GoBot, right? And I thought it'd be funny, but I think he was a little bit like,
I had one Transformer as a kid. I don't remember what his name was or what he did. I just remember that once you it was a dragon that folded out into a dude with dragon heads for hands. That's as much as I remember.
Sure. Yeah. I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. So Guy, how was because here's like, just from my trajectory, it took me a few convention games to really get the vibe of what a convention game is like. You know, like I remember the first time I went, I was like, I felt kind of nervous and awkward and not sure how, you know, I felt a little out of place. And it took me, but I could tell that there was something like special there that I wanted more of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever got there. It was just, it was kind of weird and awkward. And I mean,
you kind of came out the other end being like, I don't know that I love this convention gaming with strangers thing.
Yeah. Because like, I guess in a group setting where it's like people are repeatedly coming, it's a little less chaotic, I guess I would say.
Sure. Yeah.
In the characters, like in multiple games that I played, there was at least one person that was playing at the game who would just go do random shit, and we all kind of got dragged along.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, I guess we're in this. I tried, like, that just happens in con games. I try to like kind of set a mental clock and be like, all right, I'll give this person a few minutes to like run around and do their shit, and then I'm gonna be like, I wish to do this now in the other direction, you know. But yeah,
so and that's happen. Less of a thing when it's like people like repeatedly coming back for sessions, and it's you know, there it's more cooperative or not. So there was that. But like I had a good time. I discovered, like, I played this game that was like these old ladies that are
you did play the old lady game, and that was a good table. I mean, you had the Goodman Games road crew guy was there, the Forward Games people were there. That seemed like a really good table. I was kind of jealous that I wasn't at that table. Yeah,
and it was fun. It was an enjoyable experience. But like, I don't know.
They sold it as Murder, She Wrote, the role playing game.
All right,
right. Okay, so but here's my problem with it. It's powered by the Apocalypse system, right?
All right, yeah.
So you're rolling 2d6 for everything.
Sure.
And a 7 and 9 is a success, and a 10 or greater is like a huge success, right?
Yeah.
And that's how like literally everything works, including the fucking ending.
The like, ending?
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. So you get to the end, like basically you get these clues, and then the way that it works is there's a difficulty score that is subtracted from your final roll, and you add in the number of clues that you find throughout the session,
it just
right?
Says you do or don't solve.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we found 9 clues, and like you have to like weave a story or whatever based on the clues.
Yeah, that's how PBTA works. Yeah.
So you weave a story based on the clues, and so we found 9 clues. It was a difficulty 6, so we started off as a D6 plus 3 and rolled it.
Yeah.
And I think got an 8, and so or D12. What is it? 2D6 plus 3. Excuse me. We rolled an 8, and so the resolution was you're correct, but the guy got away, and that's always the resolution: is you're correct, but a person got away. Or you're correct, or you're not correct, right? Like
it's the Scooby-Doo ending.
There's no actual answer. It's just whatever y'all decide in a collaborative story way. And that was kind of weird. Like now that I know that, I can be in the right mood for it.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was just like, that's dumb. There's no actual answer. We just role played for like 3 hours.
PBTA as a system is built so that the GM prepares nothing. So like when you're doing a murder mystery, like you can't have a murder mystery without writing a mystery. Like as the GM, you have to be like, here is the person who done it or whatever.
Yeah, not in that system.
Yeah, for a system like PBTA, you can't have a person who done it because that's you pre-making the game, and the game presupposes that it is all player driven. So yeah, that is kind of a weird disconnect there, I guess. Yeah, it seemed like a fun table either way.
Yeah, no, it was a good time, and I
forget
really enjoyed
the Goodman Games road crew guy was. God, what's his name? I think his name's Matt. I see him at every convention. And he remembers us because we were the group that played through the Frozen in Time adventure at a DCC game, and there's this Yeti you encounter, and he just like charges you and attacks the party, and we befriended the Yeti, and we had gone and we told him about that. We were talking about the game, and he's like, "You made friends with the Yeti?" And we were like, "Yeah." And he goes, "No one has ever made friends with the Yeti." And so now every convention we're like, hey, we're the Yeti guys. And he's like, oh, the Yeti guys, full price for everything. And so, yeah, it's fun when you go to a lot of conventions and you start to see the same vendors, the same people, you play games with the same people. And it's, you build a little bit of, like you build some of that kind of weekly rapport. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the guy Eric who ran my first game, which was Root, which was really fun.
Yeah,
was in that last table.
Yeah, he ran our last game, our Cyberpunk game. He's a real good GM. I love playing with him. When I ran games at Lone Star Game Expo last year, he played in like 2 of my games. And so you just start to build these relationships and you're playing with the same people all the time. So you get there. It's just over a longer time period with conventions, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I might go to more.
Yeah.
Especially if those folks are going to be there, right?
That's the thing is they run Forward RPG, and so they will, as a group, be like announce like, "Hey, Forward RPG will be at this convention," and then when you go there, they label all their games, so you're playing with them, and so it makes it a lot easier to feel like you have kind of more of a community that you're showing up to be a part of than just like, "Hey, it's 5 random strangers pretending to be wizards for 4 hours,"
Yeah, I joined their Discord and everything.
Yeah, they're really nice. They run games all over the Metroplex. They're really awesome. And the whole thing is that they explicitly just do not run D&D 5th edition, which is great for me. So I just get to play everything that's good and nothing that's not.
Agree to disagree.
So is the Yeti Guys the name of your other podcast?
Oh, it should be now. It should be now. It was the weird. Yeah, we'd befriended that Yeti, and Andrew had to go tell the guy. I remember our GM was like, "I don't even know what to do," and so the DCC is a system. Some systems don't build it this way. They'll just be like, "Here's the adventure," and if you kind of go off book, that's why your game master is there. They'll kind of come up with something to be like, "Oh, well, this happens then." But DCC as a system always tries to cover all of its bases. So they'll be like, in the weird circumstance that they do this weird thing, consult this page. And it was kind of one of those things where it was like, you could befriend the Yeti, but no one ever fucking does befriend the Yeti. Because it's a Yeti that comes charging out of a snow, a little pile of snow and like tries to kill you.
While you're skiing?
No, you're exploring. It was one of those weird adventures where like, you're in a spaceship, but you're like medieval peoples, so you don't know what a spaceship is. So the GM has to describe everything to you in really long, excruciating terms. They can't be like, there's a button there. They have to be like, there's a strange round object protruding up out of a metal facade. And you're like, oh, a button? So no, we were in like a spaceship, and then we ran into the spaceship Yeti.
Oh, so the standard spaceship Yeti.
Yeah, like you do, like you have.
All right, fair enough.
So not the ski-free Yeti.
But yeah,
no, nice.
Sorry, no, I was gonna say that it feels. I was telling you, like it feels like I've been at Reunion Tower like 1,000 times now. Like I'd never been before in my life, and really, I was there for 2 days, two solid days.
Yeah,
and I went like for my anniversary. So like, really, it was only 3 days out of the year, but for whatever reason, it feels like I feel like I'm a regular down there at this point.
Plus, also, like, something about gaming at conventions, especially RPGs. I mean, you're at the table. Like, this, they had short sessions at this convention. They were 3-hour sessions, which is kind of too short for my liking. Kind of 4 hours is my sort of, like, minimum. I don't like running less than 4 hours. But everything they had was 3-hour blocks. And I tried to warn you without being, like, overbearing. I was like, hey, just so you know, like, convention games hit different. And you want to stay hydrated and stretch and, like, because you're sitting there for, if you got a 3-hour game and then you go to lunch, and then you have another 3-hour game, and then you got a 3-hour game in the evening, it's 9 hours of you sitting at a table.
Yeah, I had a bottle of water.
It feels like you're there for days.
Oh, man, I forgot my water bottle Saturn at home.
Oh, no.
And so when I got there, I bought like a glass bottle of like, I don't remember what it was, water of some sort.
Yeah.
And just kept refilling that the entire time. So instead of having like something that had a handle and was convenient, it was just this awkwardly shaped glass bottle I carried around everywhere.
That sucks.
You did also get to finally watch. It's become a convention tradition now, is that we watch.
Okay, you say get to watch. Let's be
the
real.
Tom Hanks classic made-for-TV movie Mazes and Monsters about the dangers of role-playing games.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
You were allowed to watch it finally.
Yeah,
we watch
allowed.
We watch it every convention. What we've learned is you watch it first night, because every other night you're all fucking wiped out from the convention. But first night you still got some juice, when you get back at the hotel or whatever, wherever you're staying. And so we do Mazes and Monsters that night, and then the other nights we just go to bed.
Yeah,
and the Airbnb worked out well.
That's nice, very nice Airbnb.
Yeah, like the original option was get hotel rooms, and this is way cheaper.
Yeah. It was cheaper and it was nicer, and there was a kitchen and you could cook and like bring food, and it was nice. I always feel like a prison inmate who snuck food into his cell whenever I have food in a hotel room, because you're just like sitting in a fucking bed, like eating spaghetti, watching cable television. It's the weirdest. Yeah, I don't like that. I want to like be at a table. It's weird. You know, it's. I don't like it. I don't like it. I need a kitchen and a table and cutlery. A couple
of hotel rooms that I was in had a little mini kitchen and a little table.
I've stayed in one of those before. Those extended stays. Oh man,
no, it was just a regular hotel.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, that's weird.
This hotel we stayed in at Vegas when we went to EDC was like, it was one of those hotels where like the top half of the hotel is all like condos and shit that they're trying to sell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was real nice.
Nice.
We have got to end this episode.
Oh yeah.
No. Okay.
I have no other way to segue it except we've been recording for over 2 hours and it's almost 11:30 at night.
I've needed to pee for like an hour and a half of it.
We got a whole nother one of these to do. Thanks, guys. Thanks for producing the show, and I had fun at the convention with you, and it was cool and stuff and whatever.
Yeah, we got some new games to look forward to. I'm on board.
Yep, I got Arcs. That was my big game I picked up. Can't wait to play some Arcs. It's going to be sweet. We're going to be weird space peoples. Weird,
but what
freaky,
are you going to do in the game?
I'd move space. I don't know. It's a board game, and you move spaceships around and you play cards.
It's like a weird space people in regular life.
Oh, I get it. I get it. We are in space. And thanks for listening to the Afterbirth. We'll be back next week and stuff. Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Damn it. Hi.